So our last few days, you all had to see me hop up and down a couple of times, introduce a couple of guests. And now I have the honor of introducing the Far Superior Ferraro, Dr. Ellen Ferraro, who will introduce our next speaker. Ellen.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here. It's been a super several days. And I have the honor of introducing our final speaker here. It is Colonel Michael McGinley, and he is our East Coast lead for the Department of Defense DIUx, so the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. Colonel McGinley first entered the Air Force in 1998 as a distinguished graduate of the ROTC program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then he went on to earn his JD from Georgetown. In the Air Force, Colonel McGinley has served tours as the acquisition manager with the Defense Information Systems Agency, as a test manager and deputy program manager for electronic command and control systems. Before being assigned to DIUx, Colonel McGinley was a joint cyber planner and the mission area lead for U.S. Cybercom's public-private partnership. In his current role, Colonel McGinley leads DIUx Boston and is responsible for executing DIUx's mission to bring innovative commercial technologies and processes to the Department of Defense. So as the Director of Research and Technology for Raytheon's Integrated Defense Systems, I am really excited to hear what he has to say about DIUx. So please join me in welcoming Colonel McGinley.
So thank you, Dr. Ferraro, Governor, and actually also like to thank the entire congressional delegation of the great state of Rhode Island. This has been a fantastic turnout, and I'm honored to be here before you today to talk about the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, give you some sense of who we are, what we do, how you can engage with us, and then really what's next? We got a lot of questions. I've been with you since the beginning of the conference. I've talked with many of you. I've fielded a lot of questions already. And so this will be a chance for me to say, hey, here's who we are. Here's how you can work with us. And then to field your questions now and say, what are we doing right? And what can we do better? In many ways, we are a startup. We've really been under this method of operating for the last year. And we're still learning and growing, and you'll see some of that as we go on, but it's a fun place to be. Okay, next slide, please. So, a lively experiment. Some of you may recognize this. Anybody know what this is from? Yeah, there we go. It's actually in the Constitution of the state of Rhode Island from Roger Williams. So this was something that I saw, said, this is fantastic, right? Because I'm representing the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, a lively experiment, as you may have heard. We have a lot going on. We are changing and disrupting the way that the Department of Defense operates. Again, a lively experiment. I grew up, I'm third generation military. I am the grandson of a Marine Master Sergeant and the son of a Marine helicopter pilot and captain. They fought in World War II and Vietnam, respectively. So, you can imagine what a lively experiment looks like when you imagine our family dinners, with me coming in as the only blue suiter. And so I take this kind of experimental approach seriously. DIUx is modeled, as we've discussed, or as you might have heard, on Silicon Valley and the venture capital model. So again, it's taking what works in the private sector, what works for venture capital, how capital is allocated efficiently and driven to its highest and best use. And so we said, hey, can we do that in the Department of Defense? And by we, I really should say, Secretary Ash Carter and his predecessor, or Secretary Mattis's predecessor, and really had that vision to execute and get us where we are today. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, who are we? What do we do? This is our mission. It's pretty succinct. We accelerate commercial innovation for national defense. It's purposely written broadly. But if you kind of let that resonate, what are we really doing? Where is our focus area? And people all the time say, hey, are you trying to be like DARPA, or are you RCO, or where do you really fit in this? And I think this slide does a good job of just succinctly putting that out. We're looking at the best technologies, methods, processes that the commercial sector is using and figuring out, hey, can we bring that back to the DoD in a way that makes sense for national defense? Now let me explain a little bit more about who we are and how we operate. A little bit of a myth buster here based on the feedback that I've received over the last couple days of people saying, are you this, but don't you do that? And so I'll try to just, set the record straight a little bit. Now we are a military unit. You'd be surprised how often we're asked that. I'm wearing a uniform today. At work on a normal day, we operate in civilian clothes because we're operating closely with the private sector. But we are a military unit. In fact, we report directly to the Secretary of Defense, so Secretary Mattis in this case. We, let's see here, there's one more thing I wanted to bring up. We're not a consortium, okay? So we also get that question asked quite frequently. There's no fee to play with DIUx. And I'll go through the process a little bit about how we operate. But when we say we have a solicitation, anyone in the world can participate. So we're very, very flexible in that. Next slide, please. All right, now you've seen this, or people have alluded to this, I think even beginning with Senator Reid on the first day, and really this shows the spread and the gap between the private sector and government R&D spending. And sometime around the mid-'70s, late '70s, those two lines diverged. And I don't think anybody doubts this or where it's heading. If you take this as a proxy for innovation, the Department of Defense has taken notice. And so that delta in the middle of those two lines is our playground. That's where DIUx operates and where we operate most effectively. Now, to paraphrase Darwin, it's the survivors, not the ones who are necessarily the strongest or the smartest, but those who are the most responsive to change. And so I think when you see organizations like DIUx springing up, this is what we're trying to do. We're recognizing that the world has changed. We're all very familiar, especially with this audience, the threats that we face on any given day. They're not going away, but they've spread out. And so we can look in each geographic area, and every area presents such a unique challenge. How do we respond to that? How do we stay on top? How do we respond to adversaries who have been able to pick up our IP? And instead of now, for the longest time, have actually been able to clone it or pick it up, but now we're actually engaged in their own development that is rivaling ours. How do we get that speed to operate? And again, that's what DIUx is trying to do. Next slide. All right, so these are just some examples I like to show of innovations that are relevant to DoD. This is not to say that the Department of Defense is not engaged in developing these type of technologies, but that the commercial sector is also doing this, and they've actually made some incredible advances. So we should be paying attention. You can see, and you're aware of Amazon's exploits into drones for delivery, also within even their own warehouse space. We have CubeSats. We talk about resilient launch. There are a lot of applications, particularly in different contingencies. We have AR and VR, augmented and virtual reality. There is so much space, and I know the Navy plays heavily in this area, but that the private sector also is making incredible inroads. And if you look and talk about workforce development and the workers of tomorrow and what they're experiencing now as gamers, and you think about how that's going to be played out in the future. I mean, this is phenomenal, but we need to be tracking this and making sure that we're aware of really the best technology that's out there. And of course, autonomy and self-driving vehicles is something that we're seeing more and more of every day. And incredible challenges hit us. How do we operate in different environments? But I think the solutions are there. And often they're waiting. You have, I think someone mentioned the fireman in Colorado or something is someone who wins some of these competitions. These solutions are out there, and the brilliant minds who are working on them are often where we would not expect. So how do we as DoD reach out to those folks and say, that person has a great idea, I want them to work with us. And usually what happens, and I know we have a mix of folks here, but I think everybody would agree, it's really hard to work with the DoD. We make it hard for you to work with us. We don't make that easy, and that's a problem. And so DIUx is designed to lower the barrier to entry, to simplify the process, and to make it easier to work with us. And this applies, again, we'll talk more about this, but whether you're a traditional contractor, a member of the DIB, whether you're a non-traditional, anybody can play with DIUx. Right? So it's also a misconception. People think that certain groups can't. Anyone can participate. And the bars remain low for everybody. And that, I think, is fantastic. You know, this is something I think you'll see that I'm a big believer in this. Obviously, you'd hope I would be. But this is working. This process that we'll get into a little bit more in depth is producing results. And it's a way that we're finding to speed our ability to bring new technology to the field. And it works really only and will continue to work if we have full participation from the entire defense community. So whether you're in a traditional player, whether you're a small business, whether you're government. And I've talked to several members of the state government here, where there needs to be a way that we can connect with universities, with state, local officials, to really figure out as a team, how do we advance national security? Because the days are gone where we can just rely on just a few actors to do that and pondering rules and regulations. We've got to be fast. In Air Force parlance, we're going to shrink down that OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act, and get in there, and we have to win with speed. Next slide. All right, so what do we do? When people try to figure out, okay, how are you organized? What's your construct? These are our 5 main portfolio areas. Now, again, if you had asked me a year ago, I'd have said, well, we don't have portfolios yet. We're considering everything. We're a startup. But this is what we looked out and we said, what are the needs of the services? What do they want from us? And we started to think about, okay, let's move some shells around. This seems to be really a bucket. This seems to be a bucket. Autonomy, okay, artificial intelligence. And so we built these into portfolios. And by using this model, and I'll explain how we're set up in a second, we're able to really deliver what the uniformed personnel are asking from us. And so to take a step back, we are modeled, we have a partnership model. So we have a managing director and 2 partners. We have East and West Coast military leads. We have COOs. We're actually built much like a business. We are very flat, very flat. Again, this is a meritocracy, and it's based on, hey, who makes the most sense to be placed in which position. These buckets that you see are led by portfolio managers. And again, you're thinking long-term, what does this allow us to do? Like any business, this allows you to put someone who becomes an expert in that area and to build up experience over time. So when you, as someone in the private sector, engages, you're going to be dealing with somebody who says, yeah, I got this. This is my area of expertise, and that makes things run more smoothly. Under each portfolio, we have project leads. So these are folks who are going to be assigned to run a specific project by a portfolio manager. Again, what you're finding is, we are finding anyway, is that we're actually developing fantastic in-house capabilities and knowledge. And we augment our team, and just to be clear, our team is active duty. We have reservists. We have guardsmen. We have contractors. We have civilians. We've got everybody. In fact, this summer I actually hired, we talked about, again, the workforce, and I think the governor mentioned training 5-year-olds. I hired a 19-year-old who just turned 19. He was getting ready to matriculate at Harvard, but he was already a published author in the field of computer vision. Fantastic. You're the right guy. You come work with us, and magic happens. And it's amazing. The amount of talent that's out there, it really is fantastic. So we just need to be more open to thinking differently and engaging people. We also have what we call a warfighter in residence and an entrepreneur in residence. And what's relevant for you here is that having a warfighter in residence, what's that mean? That means I'm going to take somebody, TDY or TAD, to bring up to our offices at DIUx, somebody who might be a pilot, an operator, a SWO, bring them in to say, okay, what are the problems that you're facing on a daily basis? We can't get fresher information than that. Now, these are folks who they're sponsored by their command. Generally, they're there for a reason, usually with money to spend, to really look at the hard problems. And that's what we want. We want the military's hardest problems. So we want their brightest operators. It's fantastic being in the Cambridge location. It's right next to Harvard and MIT. The military sends their national security fellows there. These are the best, the senior officers. They're studying. They come in. They've usually just left operational command or squadron command of some type. And they come to us and say, hey, here's what we're seeing. And by the way, here's our access that we have to the test beds. Check. That's an important piece. And you'll see as we go through the process, it has to start with a military requirement. We also have what we call entrepreneurs in residence. And this is where we could find somebody who wins one of our proposals or an entrepreneur that makes sense, and I can bring them into my office and say, look, you're going to sit here in our office for however long it takes, and we're going to give you access to this operator. So you're going to get a sense directly what's working, what's not. But because you're in our space, you get a chance to innovate and see how the rest of the unit is operating. And so what we find, I mean, much the reason that you're here is when people get together, that's when innovation happens. When people can communicate, that's when new things come out of it. And you'll see we have, you see here, we have very widely varied portfolios. So this orthogonal approach of coming at a problem from different angles is improved when you have people in your office. We can also send people out, both our warfighter and the entrepreneur, to different offices or to field sites. Again, that allows us to get the best handle on the problem and what's going on. Autonomy, to focus more specifically on the portfolio areas, really this is pretty broad, but it's focused on, right now, UAS and counter-UAS efforts, whether they're airborne, terrestrial, maritime, submaritime, you name it, okay? So we're taking in the hardest problems related to UAS, counter-UAS from the military, and we're gonna execute. Artificial intelligence, again, these are very broad. We have incredible talent that's already on our AI and machine learning team, looking at a wide variety of problems from predictive maintenance. You know, when's that equipment, that system gonna break down? Is there any way we can know that in advance? To computer vision problems, or the amount of imagery. The amount of imagery that we are receiving on any given day is mind-blowing, and that's only going to get worse. We can't have our analysts doing that by hand. I mean, we just don't have the resources. So how can we use machine learning or artificial intelligence to improve that? Human systems, we have, again, there's much to do here, ranging from helmets to cognitive improvement. You know, if you have an operator and you say, I can give you a 4% improvement in your reaction time or your cognitive ability to think through a hard problem, wouldn't that be incredible? I mean, it sounds somewhat science fiction-y, and then you realize there are actually companies who are doing this. In fact, our Olympians are making use of this right now. What about our special operators? What about our folks that we're asking to stay up and pull long shifts? How can we integrate these? So what are the problems, and how can we solve them? Information technology. Talk about a broad portfolio area. This is it, right? So this, you think about the guy behind the IT desk. That's not what we're talking about here. This is generally software, DevOps, agile development. How can we take commercial best practices and bring them into the Department of Defense to work faster, to work smarter? And these are conversations that we've had with members of the traditional defense contractors, non-traditional. I think people realize this is the way of the future, this is the way we're going, and everybody wants to get involved. And finally, space. We talk about launch, we talk about different sensors and capabilities. Again, look at the commercial sector. What the commercial sector has been able to do recently has been mind-blowing. How do we engage? How do we find those folks and work quickly? Next slide. Okay, so how do we work? And this is perhaps the most important. How do you work with us, right? It starts with a military problem. That's the first pillar. Second is funding. So what that means is if somebody comes to me and says, hey, Mike, that is really amazing technology for you. It's going to blow your mind. This is incredible. That's great. We can go sit down. We can have a beer. We can have a great conversation. I could be jumping up and down saying, this is phenomenal. I've never seen anything like this. And at the end of the conversation, you know, you're going to look at me and say, all right, do we have a deal? And I'm going to say, I got no money. Right? And so that is the key. And that is really the bottom line to working with DIUx. It has to be a funded requirement from the military. At first, you know, people hear that and say, wait a second, we know how long that takes. You're putting it on our shoulders. And my answer is, yes, I am. Because if you think about it from our perspective, we're about, I think, 48 people now. We are small. We are not resourced to be able to take in all the good ideas and innovation that you are coming up with. We just can't do it. But if I can get you to talk in the ear of somebody who has that actual problem to solve and has funding for that, well, now we have something. So now when I come to you, you see me out there, I'm coming, my wallet is full, right? So now you're happy to see me coming down the road because you know I'm for real, right? And this is how we're going to work. So our problem sets come from the services, from the Coast Guard. We take them in, we talk to them, we help them really understand what is the problem that they're trying to solve. Because frequently you get something, and I don't know if you've experienced this before, I certainly have, and my background as an acquisition officer. Here's the mil spec, this is what we need. Okay. Go find me someone who can build me that. That's one way, that's one approach, but that is not our approach. We say, back up. What problem are you really trying to solve here? And this, we talked about the go slow part. This is what we really want to understand. Let's take our time and curate the problem. What are you trying to solve? And when we get people to get that, then we say, okay, realize there are several different possible solutions that you could use to solve this problem. One could be a pharma solution. Other could be a wearable device. One could be something else that could be body armor based. It doesn't really matter, but other people and innovative companies can approach your problem set from a variety of different ways. But the key to that is you have to write your problem statement in a way that gets those minds thinking, yeah, you know what, I can handle this. And so, again, we'll talk about how we put that up. So we get this big problem, and as Dr. Ferraro mentioned, I'm a reservist, so I was activated. In a previous life, I worked as a defense contractor, and so I feel your pain. It is not easy. I saw the problems and the personnel issues of trying to predict hey, who's going to work for me as a key performer in the next 5 years down the road, or by the time you hear from me. I know what it's like when you don't hear back from the government for, I don't know, a year plus on who won an award. It is very difficult to do business with us. We move at lightning speed. And so what happens is we curate that problem, we push it down to maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs. That's it. This is the problem that we are trying to solve. And then we post it on our website. And that's the big secret here. How do you do business with us? You go to our website, www.diux.mil. That's it. We actually have an RSS feed link on there. Make sure you have an RSS reader. You can click on that, and it will send you an email anytime we release a solicitation. Simple. You click on that, you can see it, and you say, wow, what do they have? 3 or 4 paragraphs? Am I able to solve this problem? If you are, we'd like to hear from you. Now, the key here is that we only leave that solicitation up for around 7 calendar days. That's it. And again, when you think about that at first, like, oh my God, this is insane. This is insane. How am I possibly going to respond to a solicitation for a really hard problem that clearly the military can't solve in 7 days? And the answer is, that's the point. If you are the company who can answer that hard problem, you know it the first time you read those 4 paragraphs. This is going to be in your lane, or it's not, right? And so, to a lot of you talking this week, it's making sure that you're primed the pump. And that's one reason I'm here, is to make sure I'm spreading the word so people know how to engage with us. Talk to companies. If you have partner companies, get an understanding of who's who in the zoo, what problems can they solve. When you get a handle on what problems they can solve, then you know, hey, I need to reach out to so-and-so. We are very open to partnership. We encourage it. When you work with us, again, the legal authority for us is 10 USC 2371 Bravo. That allows us to use what we call another transaction authority. That's generally how we operate, so we use OTAs. And this OTA in particular is focused on developing prototypes. So we're not going to build you an F-35. We're not going to design a new carrier. That is not what we are doing at DIUx. It's someone else's job, it's not ours. What we are focused on is how can we get you a prototype to the military? How can we deliver a prototype to the military for testing or for fielding within roughly a year? So again, it gives you a sense on the TRL, where should you be? It can't be vaporware we're looking for. It doesn't have to be finished and final, but it should be somewhere in the middle. And again, the focus and the point, the legal authority for an OTA is to focus on non-traditional companies. So generally, we want people who have not done business with the DoD, and generally that's folks who haven't fallen under DoD accounting rules within the last year. And so you know who you are if you follow DoD accounting rules, because it's a serious pain. All right? However, if you are a defense contractor, you can partner. There are several ways you can participate. One is you can partner with a non-traditional contractor or a small business, as long as they do a substantial part of the work. The other way is that you say, look, we're going to take a 1/3 cost share. Okay? And you can do that if you look at your own IRAD and say, we're going to use the IRAD dollars that we put forward this effort. That's why we have this capability. Guess what? You've solved that problem. And so it's important for us to say, this is, we work if this is the Big Ten operation. If you're the best, you have the best idea and you're traditional, I want to hear from you. If you have the best idea and you're non-traditional, I want to hear from you. If you're overseas, I still want to hear from you. Because if you have the best technology to get to our warfighters, the problem that they say, this is one of the hardest problems I'm trying to solve, I don't care where you are, I don't care what you do, I want that. Now, there will be operational requirements and restrictions. So if a certain commander comes and says, hey, look, DIUx, we have to have certain security or classification restrictions, we'll take those into consideration, obviously, right? But what we're finding is the really hard problems can be solved out in the open, and often by commercial or near commercial technology. So let's find and take advantage of that. So now it's up there, you have your feed, great, it comes to you, you say, this is fantastic, this is my lucky day. My company is the best in the world at providing X. I'm going to do this. What do we want from you? Well, DIUx is designed to have to lower the bars and barriers to entry as low as possible. We want to make it easy. So all we require is submission of either a 5-page white paper, here's how we'd solve your problem, or a 15-slide PowerPoint deck. That's it, okay? Makes it easy? You bet. If you think about a company, particularly the non-traditionals who are used to seeking out venture capital, they might have given this brief 100 times, right? They know this cold. Slap on a new title slide and say, in response to DIUx, send it our way. So when I've gone out and talked to different entrepreneurs or smaller companies, they say, this is great. Now, on the other side, they look at it and say, ooh, 7 days. And I've talked with some of you this week. 7 days, that's tough, Mike. I'm not sure. What if I'm in the middle of something else? And that's just the trade-off that we had to make, right? That's just, we recognize it's fast. But again, if you know this exists, and now that we've talked about our portfolio areas, if you fall into one of these, you can say, okay, I can develop this now when I have my lead time, and I can say, this is what I do. So if something comes up, I can hit fire. What it also allows you to do is to say, look, I think I can solve a problem that somebody in the military has. And it's these are generally tech-forward, innovative problems for which there's no commercial off-the-shelf solution. So we're not a COTS store. We're not going to go buy something that exists. Generally, there's some innovation that needs to occur, so we'll work with the company to modify it a little bit. But if you go out as a member of the private sector and you talk with the military and say, hey, how are you solving this problem? They say, I don't know. You can say, have you considered this as a possible solution? No, that's interesting. Then say, go talk to DIUx. That's who we want to hear from. We want to hear from somebody who can come and say, hey, Mike, here's my hard problem I've been unable to solve. Here's money. And generally, you could say maybe $500,000 to $5 million sweet spot. It could be $10 million. It could be $100 million. I think it'll go up to $200 million. And then they come to us. But when you look at this, again, the barrier to entry of the actual submission is very, very low. That's all we require. Once we get that, we take a look. We review the merit. Is your company going to remain a going concern? For many of you here, we hope so. But we also take a look at the substantive merit. And then we say, okay, we do a down select, maybe we get to 5 or 6 chosen. And then we come on, if people have seen Shark Tank, we'll bring people into our offices, and we say, okay, give us your pitch. How would you solve this problem? And it's music to our ears if you come in and say, hey, look, here's how we do this, and by the way, here's our company. But we thought we could partner with someone else because together we came about this in a way that I think achieves synergistic effect and gives you something that you've never seen before. And by the way, these are 2 projects or products that are available commercially, but we think we can change them. That's fantastic. And I'm going to show you a couple of those projects today to get you thinking of examples of how this actually works. So we meet, so after the solicitation closes, we start our own internal clock, how well we're doing, how fast we can move. We then go out and we say, okay, we've now had a chance to meet with these folks in person. We score. We have the ability to award 1 contract. As a result, maybe 2, 3. We can have people team. There's a lot of flexibility. This is a very collaborative approach. This is not a zero-sum game. And we look at this, and a lot of the companies we work with are generally straight commercial companies for whom the DoD is either, no way, I'm not working with DoD for all those rules and regulations, or DoD is what? What does that stand for again? And so we want to make this as smooth as possible for them. And so we do this process, and we do the down select, and we work, we negotiate, we talk about IP. We're very favorable on IP. Generally, it's government use, but it'll be case by case. We talk to them, and we let people know that this is a non-protestable award. right? Which, that's interesting. So actually, once we make an award following this process, it can't be protested. And then we go back and we say, okay, we've now negotiated terms, let's rock and roll. We have been able to turn contracts in as I think the fastest we've gone is about a little over a month from the time we close our solicitation. Generally, we're about 3 to 4 months, and that is rocket speed. And that's what makes it such an exciting place to work. And that's why I so strongly support this, this endeavor. We're changing the way that DoD acquires. It's a small piece. Again, we're focused on using other transaction authority for developing prototypes. But I think it's important because what we're doing here is also saying to the industry, hey, the culture is changing. The barn door is already open. This is the way we are moving. We have to be faster than we've been in the past. Ultimately, we find pilot transition commercial solutions. And we'll get into the specifics in a little bit. We also have the capability to begin now moving past, we talk about, okay, that's great, Mike, I got you guys develop prototypes, but then what, right? So then you're gonna hit the brick wall of the FAR, you're gonna become a program of record, what happens then? Great questions, and so we're trying to work through these right now. One of the solutions we have is actually, we're going to develop what we call, and actually execute on production OTs. So that means we can take, let's say if your company's developed a prototype, and that's worked, and the customer says, that's fantastic. I want more of that. We now have a way to say, you know what? We've already had the full and open competition to the maximum extent practicable at the outset. We're going to be able to award you now a way to turn this into production. Again, that transition, overcoming, getting through that valley of death is so important. With these problems, with this process, we're able to leap across. And I think that's a significant change. Next slide, please. All right, so where are we? Where does DIUx exist? So we have our offices, main offices are in Silicon Valley, where we're headquartered. I run our Cambridge office in Boston. We have a presence in the Pentagon, and we have a small office that we've opened up in Austin, Texas. Again, giving us national coverage. We have, I think about why we are where we are, about 2/3 of the venture capital spend is in the Silicon Valley area. The other third is between Boston and New York. So that's why we have these presences where we do. We engage very closely with the venture community to say, what do your portfolios look like? Who are the best? Who are the industry leaders in this? If we have a problem, where should we go? What are the technologies? We found that very successful, a good process. Now, we've had 39 states so far competing for DIUx. We'd like more. We should be at 50. And so one of the reasons, again, I'm here today, and honored to be with you, is say, how do we engage you? What's going to work? And I think, hopefully this provides you an understanding of how to work with us. We're small, right? I like to think of it, we punch above our weight. We have 48 people, we can only do so much. In fact, a year ago, we were still getting the word out there. Now we've hit a point where we're oversubscribed. The services now know who we are. They support what we're doing. And they see it as it's just one more arrow in their quiver. We don't say we're every arrow. We don't claim to be, but we are one important arrow. And so now that they know that, we say, DIUx can be a de-risking function for me. They can move at lightning speed. Oh, and by the way, if it doesn't work, we failed, but we failed fast. I can iterate and try again. But I've tried it, if nothing else. And it also is a way for us, again, this should be all blue, hopefully by the next time, if I see you next year, getting the best from across the United States in a way that we just haven't been able to reach before. We're crowdsourcing. That's it. We are crowdsourcing national security in some ways, and it is producing fantastic results. Next slide, please. All right, so the numbers. This is the money side. In the last year, we've been able to accomplish 47 contracts valued at just over $100 million. We've been able to do it in about 2 to 3 months average time to award. So, again, when you're used to dealing with traditional, large program numbers, $100 million, well, it's $100 million. But what I would say is, if you really look at what's going on here, we're able to move so quickly and obtain technology very cheaply. They were paying a fraction of what we otherwise might have paid for this. And then it's important, there's a reason that the box on the bottom is in blue. So that's $1.8 billion in venture capital funding in our portfolio companies. Those companies we've done business with. And it's interesting if you look at the breakdown. We've had about this Saildrone. I think a couple people have mentioned Saildrone. another company in our portfolio. Autonomous Maritime, ISR, fantastic. Again, if you look at the companies generally we work with, especially the non-traditionals, there's a commercial market, right? And that commercial market is going to feed them the majority of their capital so they can continue to innovate. So they're not reliant on the government. And if you think about that one of those first slides that I showed and how we operate in that delta, if you look at it and you say, wow, if that commercial market is going to continue to drive innovation, we can come in and leverage that when we need to. This is a great example of that. And so, from a sensor standpoint, you can add all sorts of sensors on there, but the company will still maintain control of the actual hardware and provide you with the data. And they are in operation now, and it's received strong interest from several of our services. Next slide. Now we have a new technology we're working on. It's actually, make sure I get this right, therapeutic hypothermia. And this is a way you probably have heard of the golden hour after someone is injured to get to a hospital or to get to care. What if we could extend the golden hour to 2 hours or to 3 hours? What if we could use aerosolized saline particles directly infused and delivered to the lungs to do that? Fantastic technology. The need is there from our customers. Okay, we're experimental. Let's try this. Next slide. We also have and this is actually a good example of the types of projects we're working on. This is a high-speed drone. This drone is actually capable of autonomous or semi-autonomous flight paired with 4th or 5th gen fighters. Again, you start thinking about this, and one of the most compelling arguments, I believe, about moving fast is you can iterate so quickly. And the faster you iterate and you get within your enemy's cycle, your adversary's cycle of development and fielding, you start to see how technology changes con ops. And that's really where this is driving. So we're talking technology, but really what we're here is changing the way that we defend our country by changing our capabilities markedly, just over a short amount of time. Next slide. This, this is important, right? So I want you all to see this. This is your Secretary of Defense talking about DIUx. Yes, we started with Dr. Ash Carter, former Secretary. We recently hosted Secretary Mattis at our site in Mountain View just a few weeks ago, and he provided us his strongest support and noted that our influence in DoD will be growing. Now, ultimately, this is about people. Technology is about people. Innovation is about people. And so we need to continue to engage the right people and attract the right folks on our team. But having the support from leadership, and I can tell you we've spoken with the chiefs of staff and the 4-star and 3-star leadership and the services, and they're for this. They support us because this is, again, one more arrow in their quiver. Next slide. All right, so I'll get ready. I'm sure there are any questions here. We can do that. Again, I want to remind you that the best way to engage with us is to go out and see our website. We have an RSS feed that's out there. Make sure you sign up for that. So anytime we have a release, and we've had 47 in the last year, so it's not going to be every week, but it'll be frequent, that you'll get notification. And what I'd also ask is, let's fire that out to our network, right? So you have network, you have people, if you're a traditional defense contractor, companies that you're maybe mentoring. If you're a member of the government, to your universities. We can work very flexibly and very creatively, but it works really if we get out to the right people. You know the right people where this needs to reach. And so I would ask that you make the most of your network and provide those best folks back to us. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for your patience. I know I'm the last one preventing you from leaving, so I am aware of that, and I very much appreciate it. Thanks. Any questions? Sir.
A lot of our discussion in the last couple of days was difficulty in transitioning technology programs of record. Do you have any examples where the prototypes have actually transitioned to programs of record?
Great question. So just to highlight for folks who might not have heard, so do we have any examples of where we've actually been able to transition? The answer is no. So we are so young that we haven't had a chance. What I'm going to tell you is look out this fall. We think we're going to cross that barrier shortly. So we've thought about it. We've recognized that as a hard problem and said we're going to make an attempt. I think we're going to make some success, and that people will start to notice, wow, you can actually do this, to make that transition into a production mechanism. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll stick around if you have any questions.
So thank you, Colonel. That was very interesting. Appreciate it. And I think you may have already heard that this is a coveted coin from SENEDIA, so we appreciate you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.